'cause you're a joker, and I'm a girl.
Oh, Joe, thank goodness. I was sure you were a goner.
I had to spend 8 hours in that Taylor Swift torture chamber just because you couldn't name Kiari Pami Pami's first Halloween single.
Hey, she's had 3 of them, and I don't even listen to J-pop. How was I supposed to know?
I don't know all the hour-long verbal essays I've given on how she's revolutionised bubblegum pop.
Look, I'm sorry, and if it makes you feel any better, I got stuck in a chamber where I had to sing every word of the High School Musical soundtrack, and every time I get a lyric wrong, they'd cut a toe off.
I see you still have all your toes.
And your knowledge of 90s boy bands gets pretty sharp when your hands are about to be chopped off.
I am a pianist. I would burn every last copy of Abbey Road if it meant I would keep my hands.
Bloody heartless. That's what you are. That's why you've survived so far.
I don't have time for this. This is the last room. After this, we are done.
Congratulations, Joe, Nick, for making it to the final room. You will see 2 platforms. Please stand, 1 on each. Failure to comply, as always, will result in instant death.
Let's get this over with.
I will ask you a question each in turn. Conferring with each other will result in death for both of you. You each only need to get 2 correct answers and your platform will rise, letting you out of here. As you can see, each platform is held up by 2 ropes. Each time you answer incorrectly, a rope will be cut. If you are the one who answered incorrectly, then you can choose whether it's yours or the other person's rope that is cut. If someone drops, the other person will automatically be allowed to escape. Do you understand?
Can I just ask, what's down there?
An inescapable room, where you will slowly perish with the best of Miley Cyrus CD constantly playing.
So does the CD not have any songs on it?
Silence! Nick, for your impertinence, I will start with you. Complete these lyrics. Everybody wants to be a master. Everybody wants to show their skills.
Everybody wants to get there faster, all the way to the top of the hills.
Correct. Pokemon Johto opening theme. Nerd. Joe, what is the name and year of release of Björk's second full-length album?
Post released in 1995.
Incorrect.
What? Oh, hell no, you're not about to count the bunch of songs she released as an 11-year-old as a full-length album.
Would you like your ropes to be cut or Nick's?
My own. You know, Nick, if you wanted to, you could guarantee escape next turn. Get it right and you escape, and get it wrong, you can have my other rope cut and still escape.
Joe, I would never do that. We're getting out of this together.
Nick, how many Sufjan Stevens albums does it take to draw tears from a crocodile?
42?
Whoa. I'm a homicidal maniac, and even I think that's overkill. The correct answer is 1. Choose someone's rope to cut. If you choose to cut Joe's, you are free to escape.
I'll cut my own.
Thanks, Nick.
Just don't get this next one wrong. We don't have another chance.
Joe, if the C sharp and the second D above it were played together, and then they moved towards each other chromatically 2 notes, what would be the interval between the 2 final notes?
Major 6th?
Correct.
I don't like that. That question was too easy.
Nick, this is your last question. Get this right and you will ascend to freedom, and Joe will have to answer his last correctly to join you. Answer this incorrectly, and you have the choice of sacrificing yourself for Joe or sacrificing Joe for yourself. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What is Radiohead's best album?
Oh no, Nick, don't.
No conferring.
Radiohead's best album is OK Computer.
Incorrect.
No, you tool, you absolute normie tool.
It has consistently the highest score from the public and critics. It's their best sold, their most well known. It had more influence than any of their other albums. How is it not OK Computer?
I asked for none of those things. I asked for their best album.
Oh, please.
And after all the times I lectured you on why it's Kid A.
Choose who you are sacrificing.
No! This is absolute bull. I'm done with this. I sacrificed Joe.
What? Screw you, Nick.
No! Look, I'm tired of you Kid A fans pretending that OK Computer doesn't beat it in every single measurable way.
I'm actually an In Rainbows fan. would have also accepted the bends. You are free to go. Leave before your impertinence makes me change my mind.
Gladly.
My victim is claimed. Another satisfactory Halloween.
F sharp. A sharp. Revisited.
Boo! I mean, welcome to F Sharp A Sharp Revisited, the music review podcast where we take a peek at some music and let you know what's what. I am Joe, the ghost of the music critic supervillain, and with me is the man at the edge of sanity, Nick.
I'm sorry I killed you. I'm not sorry I killed you. OK Computer is better.
Kid A is
Okay.
better, but I think we can at least agree that the killer doesn't know at all what he's talking about. That was rigged.
In Rainbows sucks.
Okay, well, that I'll disagree with, but
In Rainbows is overrated.
In Rainbows is their
I
second
listened
best
to
album.
listened to it again the other day and spent the whole time thinking I could write these songs.
You couldn't.
Yes, I could.
You could not write
I could
all I need.
I could easily write most of the songs on In Rainbows.
You could not write 15 Step.
Yes, I could.
You could not.
Oh, it's in a complex time. That makes it so difficult.
It also, but they groove it really well.
We're a minute into the podcast. Shall we actually move on?
Yeah, Radiohead aside, we actually have a bit of a Halloween-themed podcast for you with some a few spooky, vaguely albums.
Yeah.
We'll see where it goes. But one thing that scares me, or at least makes me a little bit nervous, is when a band who is very capable of being really good but also really bad announces that they're releasing a new album.
Yeah.
Weezer.
Yeah. I mean, I was unfortunate enough to hear their new single before I heard that it was going to be on their new album. I was really hoping it was a one-off, and so Weezer have a new album out, and it's called Pacific Daydream. And if you're even slightly familiar with Weezer, you'll know in the 90s, pretty good.
Yeah.
In the noughties, absolutely diabolical.
Yeah, not to be listened to.
No. And then they released a single called Back to the Shack, which was great because it was going, hey, we're going to go back to this time that we were good and make songs like that. And everyone was like, woo! And then they released the White Album, and the White Album was wonderful.
It was great.
Absolutely fantastic.
One of my top ones of 2015, was it?
Yeah.
Or was it last year?
I think it's 2015.
Yeah.
Or was it 2016?
It was...
Was it this year?
No, I think it was last year.
Pretty sure it was last year.
It was pretty recent.
Well, I listened to Feels Like Summer off of their new album Pacific Daydream and thought, wasn't Back to the Shack an apology for this? Let's just get it out the way. This album is a real step down.
It's a real step down. At first listen, actually, on first listen, I kind of thought it was okay, but then second listen
Same.
and third listen, I was just like, no.
I've got to say, though, you know that saying, it's worse than bad, it's mediocre.
Yeah.
I'm glad that this album is bad rather than mediocre, because I've realised I actually have strong opinions on every single song on it.
Okay.
And out of the 10 tracks of it, I like 40% of it.
That's not bad. That's
not
actually
bad.
better than what I've got from it. So, where should we start with it?
Well, I think that this album is very much riding on the coattails of their Grammy nomination for Best Rock Album for the White Album, because I get the feeling that now that they're in their mid-40s and they'd fallen out of relevancy a bit, they've looked at this and gone, oh, remember the days of songs like Beverly Hills? Let's do that.
Well, who would think that?
I don't know. I don't know. They've made this album to try and relive their hit singles days, and previously they'd actually announced, I believe, that they were going to be working on Weezer, the Black Album, which, you know, black, dark, possibly Pinkerton Part 2. You never know. That could have been pretty good. But instead they've taken this detour to make this sort of kind of experimental, poppy sound, beachy sound album.
I'm not sure how experimental you'd say it is.
That was going to be my next point. And out off the bat, it's not as bad as it could have been. I think it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, the first track is the only track I would say that I really enjoyed on the album. I think Mexican Fender is the best track, and then the rest just...
Yeah, I agree.
didn't live
Even though Mexican Fender has got one of those just the most boring guitar riffs ever,
Yeah.
it's surprisingly endearing.
Yeah, Endearing is a good word because it is very slow. It's
Yeah.
almost AC/DC-ish, but popified. But it
And
kind of works.
It's got a really good bridge in it as well, and I like
Yeah.
the layering.
Oh, the
and
bass work is quite nice.
the
in that
music,
track as well.
the music video for it as well. Not technically on the album, I will say is actually really good. It's about a seagull that falls in love with a woman on the beach, and
I
then
haven't seen it,
and then
but-
she eats the seagull.
I think I'm gonna have to watch it now.
Like I've said, on this album, I either really like the songs or really dislike them. There's no in between. As far as songs that I did like go, we've just mentioned Mexican Fender. I thought Weekend Woman was pretty endearing. It's got a horrifically sweet chorus that I quite like and another good bridge. Then Any Friend of Diane's has got a really catchy hook, and I think it's a pretty good ending.
Okay. I'll just say one thing about, well, a couple of things about Weekend Woman. I really liked the kind of bells and whistles that go on in the chorus. I think it really adds a nice layer to it. But I really didn't like the verses. It sounded like they were trying to rip off One Direction, which for me is a completely bizarre concept because One Direction was based off ripping off classic rock riffs but making them more popified, watered down. So that song left me with a bizarre taste in my mouth, I have to admit.
I do completely agree. There was one song on the album which I thought sounded a lot like Ed Sheeran's new hit. You know, the one that goes, "We can change this whole world with a piano."
The one I made that video about. Okay.
Yeah, Joe made a video about that on his account. You should listen to it.
It was, yeah.
One of the things that really lets down this album is Rivers Cuomo's voice is kind of crap on this album. I really don't like it.
Well, his voice has always been a bit like that, but
But
it's
it doesn't fit with this at all.
It doesn't. It's always worked with their previous sounds.
But it doesn't work with this at all.
It doesn't work with the kind of more cleaner.
I don't like the fact that Rivers Cuomo is now 47 and still seems to think he's 25. Just grow up. Grow up.
I mean, that doesn't bother me so much, but I can see that. I
Well-
can see that point of view.
Every other song on the album I don't really like very much. The worst one being, I think, QB Blitz is just one of the most boring songs I've heard this year.
It's completely forgettable. The only thing I actually remember about it is there are some descending guitar notes towards the end of the song I thought were pretty nice, but some of the lyrics were, I did note down some of them. All of my conversations die a painful death, you see. I can't get anyone to do algebra with me. He.
I did think that the lyrics on this album are very standard Weezer fare and not really worth looking into. Like, they're just
yes and no.
so white bread.
I think they try to be quirky, but often it just kind of misses the mark a little bit, and I'm just sitting there thinking, what was he just saying? What was he going on about?
I don't want to get too much into every track, even though I have strong opinions on all of them. But I think even the ones that I don't like, where they've got some interesting bits in it, just still come across as really boring. Like Beach Boys has got a really good bass line in it, but everything else surrounding it is just dull.
That's something I noted because I did not like the groove of that track. The bass and the guitars just didn't work together, and I couldn't feel myself moving along to the song that I think the song wanted me to do. So yeah, that was a bit of a dud, really. Another instrumental one that I didn't get was Happy Hour, to be honest, because there's this little synth thing going on in the background, which is trying to, I think, it's trying to give me a little bit of a summery feel, but the production of it feels so dense and claustrophobic that the whole song just makes me feel like I don't want to breathe.
And that weird vocal backing thing that's frequent throughout the entire song that just pops up again and again. It's so irritating.
It's weird. I just wanted to skip it.
You wouldn't be able to tell it's a Weezer song if you weren't told it's by Weezer, I don't think.
Pretty much. That was one I always skipped. I think the whole stretch from Beach Boys to QB Blitz was pretty bad in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I can't give this album as low a score as I want to, because I do have to admit there are some songs on here that I really like. Mexican Fender is just great as a single.
Yeah.
It works really well.
Yeah.
But there's just so much you have to plough through on this to get to the good cuts.
Yeah, but even then, I found, while the cuts towards the end of the album were better than the first half, I didn't really find myself being all that engaged with them. I mean, they were pleasant enough, but not really doing a whole lot to make up for the tracks that came before it, in my opinion.
Well, that's about all I have to say on the album. I'm going to say 4 out of 10.
I'm going to say 3 out of 10. 3 out of 10. Listen to Mexican Fender and don't...
Then turn it off and listen to the White Album.
Yeah.
Forget that this album ever existed, and hopefully next they'll release the Black Album.
Yeah, and it will be much better.
I hope.
We can hope.
You can never tell with Weezer.
Yeah, so...
One second they're making great 90s nerd rock, the next they're making Beverly Hills. That's where I want to be. To be. Living in Beverly Hills. Don't you just love songs where the vocals only have one note?
Sometimes, yes. I can think of one example
7
where that...
a.m. waking up in the morning, gotta get dressed, gotta
I
go
wasn't thinking of that
downstairs.
song, but yeah. There is one song that I think does that really well, and that's Ruled by Secrecy by Muse. That song, an absolution. Anyway, I think we should move on now. We've given our scores. I know what we should do. We should say, if Weezer were trick-or-treaters, are we giving them the top of the range sweets? Are we giving them bargain basement candy, or are we shutting the door in their faces?
Can we do that, except go back to the duck analogy from 2 podcasts ago and shoot them?
Okay, you can be the you can be the angry redneck at the door.
No, I'm going to take Weezer's sweets off them and then slam the door in their face.
Oh, okay. I wasn't going to steal any candy, but yeah.
You take the good cuts. You know.
I'll give them one sweet each for Mexican Fender, and then that'll be it. That'll be it. Anyway, I think we need to
Stop talking about Weezer.
pretty much.
Let's talk about someone else. Let's talk about someone who is actually in their 20s.
Yeah. Someone young and relevant.
Yeah.
All that stuff, and a bit of a Halloween-themed title to their album as well. Turn Off the Lights. That's scary.
By Julien Baker.
Yes.
Julien Baker is this, I think she's 22 now, singer-songwriter. She had her debut album, Sprained Ankle, in 2015, which was, I think she's already really got her sound down to a T. She knows exactly what she's able to work with well. And she's just continuing it on this album, except making it a bit grander, though still with very minimal instrumentation. It's very much guitar and piano and her voice throughout. Did you listen to Sprained Ankle?
I didn't know.
Yeah, me neither, actually. Which is strange because I feel like I should have. The first time I came across Julien Baker was with the AV Club doing their covers series. She did a cover of Photo Booth by Def Cab for Cutie, which is hauntingly beautiful. One of the best covers I've ever heard. I highly recommend you look it up. And I've listened to the singles from Sprained Ankle, which I thought were pretty good, but I never got around to listening to the whole album. So going into this, I kind of suspected it would be a lyrics album.
Yeah.
And I was right.
Definitely. The first thing I noted is that the lyrics are pretty fantastic throughout.
Some of the best this year. I've even made a note on the song Hurt Less. Probably my favourite lyrics of the year on that one.
Yeah, for me it was Televangelist and Happy to Be Here had my 2 favourite lyrics, just because she's so good at the extended metaphors and bringing them out to full effect in those songs. So I just love Televangelist, the imagery of her heart eating herself. She refers to her cannibal chest, and then
I've written down a few of my favourite lines on the album that I just want to read out now. So from the song Appointments, you've got, maybe it's all going to turn out all right. Oh, I know that it's not, but I have to believe that it is pretty much a theme for the album.
Yeah.
Then on Shadowboxing, you've got, but there's a comfort in failure, singing too loud in church, screaming my fears into speakers till I collapse or burst, whichever comes first. On Happy to Be Here, a diagram of faulty circuitry explains how I was made, and now the engineer is listening as I voice all my complaints. From an orchestra of shaking metal keeping me awake, I was just wondering if there was any way that you made a mistake.
That's my favourite.
Because I miss it the way that I miss nicotine. If it makes me feel better, how bad can it be? Well, I heard there's a fix for everything. Then why not me? Oh, so many chills.
I'm crying.
Next guy. On Hurt Less. See, I've started wearing safety belts when I'm driving, because when I'm with you, I don't have to think about myself and it hurts less. Oh, that bit almost made me cry. And I don't cry at songs or films or that sort of
Yeah.
thing. I just find it impossible to. And finally, possibly the best moment on the album for me comes at the very end with Claws in Your Back, with the very end where she goes, "When it won't leave me alone, I'm better off learning how to be living with demons I've mistaken for saints. If you keep it between us, I think they're the same. I think I can love the sickness you made, 'cause I take it all back. I changed my mind. I wanted to stay." And she belts out that final word with just such emotion that I don't think it would be possible to not have shivers
Yeah.
run down your spine. And I think something I took away on my very first listen of this album is that this is a singer-songwriter who is giving you everything she has to offer with every single song.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's for better or for worse, because there isn't a huge amount of variety on this album, instrument-wise. And if you're not completely focusing on the lyrics, it can be a bit of a drag.
Yeah, that was my one main
That's
criticism
my
of
only
the album,
criticism
because
of the album.
she's got such a great voice and she's so good at lyricism. The only fault I found in her very quite mature songwriting for such a young age was that just that little bit of diversity in the instrumentation would have made it that little bit better for me.
But this album still packs such an emotional punch, and like I said, she's really knows what she's doing with this one sound that she knows that she is perfect for. That it's very difficult for me to take away huge amounts from it, just because I think it could be a bit more varied.
Just another good point I want to make on the album: it has fantastic production, I thought.
Oh yeah,
Just the instrumentation, because there's not a lot of it. She really knows how to draw a lot out of the sound of one instrument and make it really dynamic, and that really did help fill the soundscape.
and something else I liked about this album was because with the very sort of minimal instrumentation she has, and you were just talking about how she's managed to get every instrument to sound really great in the soundscape, sort of flesh it out to an extent without making it grand, because it really is quite an introspective album. It deserves to be fairly quiet.
Yeah.
On her first album, I realised that she sounds completely beaten down on Sprained Ankle, and I feel like the title is kind of a reference to that, with the whole physical injury, not being able to go on. And on this album, there are some times where she sounds so damn defiant. Like the ending of Sour Breath, for example, where she repeats, "The harder I swim, the faster I sink." The way she completely belts that out, it just really stirs the soul.
Definitely.
I highly recommend this album for anyone who wants a good cry.
Yeah, so would I. I do have one tiny little criticism of this album, though. Well, not so much of the albums. It's while I think her vocals are amazing, she has such great spinter soprano vocals that strike through. I kind of felt like she relied on them a little bit too much, like suddenly going loud at the end of songs to draw out the emotional impact. I think it could have done with a bit of diversity as well how she handled that, but it's still effective when she does it.
I think that just draws into the other point of variety in songs. I think you could just lump that in with variety in the way songs are written, because I noticed that a lot of the songs on this album go verse 1, verse 2, bridge, chorus, end, and there isn't that much change from that structure. But I think that she just does it so well that I find it really difficult to hate.
If this sounds like the kind of album you want to listen to, you do listen to it.
If you want to hear songs about mental illness and substance abuse and just general misery.
I'm sure this album is about a post-breakup depression, essentially. So yeah, if that sounds like something that's going to float your boat, then get floating.
I think that this album is a very strong second effort from Julien Baker. Favourite songs on it are Appointments and Hurt Less and Claws in Your Back. And I didn't have a single song on it that I thought was weak compared to the others. Just
it was very
songs
consistent.
that weren't as strong.
I would say there are no weak tracks. My personal favourites were Televangelist and Happy to Be Here, just because I think those two tracks had lyrics that I thought were very complexly woven, and I enjoyed them because of that.
I do recommend this album a lot.
Yeah, I'd give it I'd give it a strong 7. It could have been, for me, it could have been higher with that bit more diversity in it, but I still think it's a great album.
I give it an 8. Decent 8.
Yeah.
I started doing a cover of the Julien Baker cover of Photo Booth because that was the only song I knew by her at the time, and thought, okay, I'll just put that in because I haven't got time to do anything else. And then I thought, but this doesn't really fit in with the Halloween theme well enough. So instead I did a cover from a band which is just nothing to do with anything we've talked about so far. Joe walked in on me recording the end of it today, so he already has an idea of what it is. So here, listen to this cover I did of Bad Bad Things by Andrew Jackson Jihad.
It's very scary.
Your family, and now I am going to kill you too. I made your brother bleed, I made your father scream, and I made your mother say those things that she said to me. She said, do with me what you want, but please don't hurt my family. Don't hurt my family. Take my pride, take my life, take my body, don't take the ones that are close to me. Oh, do with me what you want, but please don't hurt my family. Don't hurt my family. Take my pride, take my life, take my body, don't take the ones that I love. And I continued without mercy. So I looked into your eyes, and I saw a reflection of a coward that you and I both hate very much. And then I grabbed the knife, and I let the blood out of your throat, and I smashed those tiny nails inside of your skull. And I got to thinking, if I don't go to hell when I die, I might go to heaven. If I don't go to hell when I die, I might go to heaven. If I don't go to hell when I die, I might go to heaven. If I don't go to hell when I die, I might go to heaven. Might go to heaven, but probably not.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm definitely not saying this, 5 seconds after the last thing I said? I think that Andrew Jackson Jihad made a mistake changing their name to AJJ. They don't like the way that they went, oh, people are getting offended by us being called Andrew Jackson Jihad, we'll change it to AJJ, because, one, you're a band that wrote a song like the one that I just did.
Yeah.
You really shouldn't be fearing that sort of thing. And two, if you're going to change your name, don't change it to the abbreviation of your original name. It doesn't seem like you're trying to distance yourself that far from it, does it?
Yeah, it's like if you're going to be edgy, be edgy.
Yeah.
Just be it.
Well, rant over. Let's move on to something else.
Yeah, talking of edginess,
Are we talking about the dead Kennedys now?
we're talking about the dead Kennedys.
Joe's just suggested that because there weren't many albums coming out that we wanted to talk about over the past few weeks, that instead we do some spooky albums.
Halloween themed.
Yes. And I couldn't really find that many that I wanted to talk about. There was Metropolis Part 2 by Dream Theater, which isn't really spooky, but does have some very eerie moments in it and a kind of creepy story, but it's not spooky in that sense. And then I considered doing either Death Consciousness by Have a Nice Life or Weighing Souls with Sand by The Angelic Process. Both fantastic albums, by
Yeah,
the way.
I agree.
Which
I agree.
rely on really dense, dark atmosphere, even
Yeah.
if the songs themselves...
Me and Nick would have loved reviewing
Yeah.
them, and we would have felt happy and sad afterwards.
I used to have a radio show at Keele University with some friends, and the very first song I ever played on it was Million Year Summer by The Angelic Process, to which we got a comment in from someone saying, this sounds like a swarm of angry bees attacking a drum kit. Anyway,
Yeah.
neither of those ideas I thought were good enough. So then I decided, what's Joe really scared of?
You wouldn't dare, Nick.
So you may have noticed, if you're a regular listener, we haven't actually done any punk rock on this show so far. That's because Joe is a prog snob.
It's because I'm scared of punk.
Joe doesn't.
Punk scare me.
Joe doesn't like the simpleness, I'd say, of punk, the very directness of it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Joe as a
accurate,
music student likes dominant sevenths and
I could go a bit further than dominant sevenths. Give me some 7/8. Give me some sharpened 13th chords. Come on, Nick.
well, this isn't my favourite punk album that we're going to talk about, but it's the one that I thought would scare Joe most. It's Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables by the Dead Kennedys, released in 1980. And I thought, well, you know what, it probably has some bits in it that Joe might quite like the 5/4 sections on one of the songs, the quite interesting lead up to the second track on it. And Joe, I'm guessing you didn't like it.
I didn't like it.
No.
There are some bits I appreciated about it. I will give it some credit. But yeah, overall, it's a punk album.
Yeah, I thought better. If I wanted to give you a punk album I thought you'd like, I'd go for some Bomb the Music Industry or a bit of Jeff Rosenstock, maybe. Basically, any band that has Jeff Rosenstock in,
Yeah.
you might
Pretty
appreciate. This, however, no, I'm just trying to scare you. So this album is pretty damn edgy, I would say.
Yeah.
It's the
agreed.
debut album from the band, 14 tracks, 32 minutes, and where to start on this? Joe, why don't you tell me why you didn't like it?
Well, the reason why I didn't like it is that it's a good example of punk music. It's it's very angry, very emotional, and very, very biting with its lyricism. But I think just a lot of it comes across as hot air a lot of the time. That being said, I do think some of the more political songs on the album are actually the better tracks. Songs I actually quite enjoyed Holiday in Cambodia. That is my one takeaway song from the album.
That is the best song on the album.
So that is my favourite track. So I'll get the praise out of the way, get that finished with. But other songs like Kill the Poor, When You Get Drafted, and Chemical Warfare, I think as punk tracks, they do make the point that they want to make. But for me, I suppose it's just my temperament and what I like to get out of music. I just want a bit more nuance, really, that I just wasn't getting out of any of those tracks.
Okay, well, that's not something that punk rock does. So it's not surprising that you didn't like it. I personally think that the lyrics on the album, for the most part, are pretty damn good for punk. As much nuance as you could probably get from it. Songs like Kill the Poor, I think the lyrics are hilarious. On Forward to Death as well, it's pretty good. But
yeah, I will say...
Sorry, you go.
When You Get Drafted had my favourite lyric, the chessboard's filling up with red. That was good. Good on you, Dead Kennedys.
I do think that the lyrics at some points, like you said, do come across as hot air, but I actually think it's on the less politically charged ones. Songs like Chemical Warfare, even though it's one of my favourite songs on the album, I don't think the lyrics really have much momentum to them because it's very hard to tell why they're doing this. It's the lyrics about unleashing mustard gas onto a rich person's golf course. It just seems a bit empty.
Yeah, it does seem a bit empty, but I do think that song does have a good way of it. What it does well is just this overall sound of panic, which I quite like.
Oh yeah, the last minute or so where it's just screaming and coughing.
I really liked the Sobre las Olas bit as well that they covered, which was a nice touch, and I think worked really well.
I will say though that the point I was going on to say is that some of the lyrics, besides that, I just plain don't like. The main culprit, just this one song in particular I'm thinking of, is I Kill Children.
Right, okay.
That song just does not click with me at all.
It doesn't click with me either, and I hate children. I bloody hate kids, but don't quite want them dead.
Well, frontman Jello Biafra, I don't know how to pronounce his name, went on to say it's probably his least favourite track he's ever written. And it's just so meaningless. It's just, this is what a serial killer might be thinking when he kills children.
Yeah,
and
It's the kind of thing that, as a punk band, they're all rebellious. I can imagine them writing the song thinking, yeah, this is sticking it to them. But then when you actually kind of look back at it, you kind of think,
Yeah, just I feel like punk has to have some sort of motivation for having these songs, and
Yeah.
I don't really understand why it was written.
yeah,
Where the songs like "Kill the Poor," I can understand criticising the superiority complex of the rich. Songs like "California über alles," which is satirising Deutschland über alles, said by
See.
the Nazi Party, which is an attack on liberalism and this idea of a hippie government.
See, California Über Alles was my least favourite song on the album.
I just like that they don't discriminate between who they're going to attack.
I mean, while that is good, I also found it a bit of a mess of a song. I don't think the satire worked particularly well there. It was going for a bit of a humorous spin, but there was nothing in the instrumentation to really reflect that, and because of that, it just kind of fell flat to me. I felt like their songwriting was letting them down there, but then again, I don't get punk, so...
Well, I will say that I think that the songwriting on this album is quite good for punk, you know, quite interesting. There are, like, for a start, songs like Ill in the Mind has this really cool discordant part in 5/4 time, which matches
Yeah.
the lyrics, I think, and the layers are kind of choppy and glitchy, which is really cool for the time that it was written.
Yeah.
And then on various songs like Let's Lynch the Landlord and Chemical Warfare, they have these parts which sort of take from other genres of music. For example, Let's Lynch the Landlord has this sort of surf rock guitar solo in the middle,
Yeah.
and then Chemical Warfare has this heavy metal riff at the beginning and this sort of warped patriotic theme in the middle. I just think that these elements they throw in make it a really interesting listen, so it never gets boring.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I still think I would have liked more interesting elements, and I do think most of the time I was listening to just kind of boring punk thrashing around, really.
But you're the only one
Yeah.
who thinks that.
True. True.
I'm glad that you like this album more than giving it a 1, though.
I definitely like it more than a 1, but I do think this album does suffer from structural problems, because there are political themes in the album, but then it suddenly goes on weird tangents, like in songs like I Kill Children, Stealing People's Mail just feels a little bit weird. There doesn't seem to be any cogency to how the album is structured. And then another thing I thought was a pretty poor placement was Forward to Death as the second track.
I think that works really well.
Okay. I didn't at all.
I just completely disagree with you, whatever your point is going to be.
Okay. Basically, because the first song is Kill the Poor, which I think is a decent enough opening track. They make their point. And then straight away, just let's bear in mind, this is their first album. This would be the first thing people would listen to from them. And immediately they go straight into wallowing self-pity. And it's not a good song either. It's just, this world brings me down.
Yeah,
and
but it's got a great opening.
So it doesn't mean the rest of the song's any good.
I think the rest of the song's fine.
The
Not the
rest
best
of-
song they have, but not bad.
But it just felt so indulgent, really. I don't think there was really enough in that song to warrant it being so self-pitying. I think if you're going to have a song like that, it needs to go a little bit later on in the track listing after you've earned it.
Okay.
And then
I disagree, but I get your point.
And then there was the cover at the end, which felt a little bit out of place. I liked it, Viva Las Vegas, but
I don't understand how you can think it feels out of place. It's a cover song, so it belongs at the end of the album.
no.
The only time that an album has done a cover song which has worked in the middle of the album is...
You going to tell me?
I'm waiting for you to guess.
Feeling Good by Muse?
No,
Because that
because I
is
don't
true.
think that works that well in the middle
it
of the
does,
album.
it does.
I was going to say Hallelujah by Jeff Buckley.
That is the much better choice, but yeah.
No, I think this song is really great at the end. I think it's a really exciting, fun cover. I love his mock Elvis voice, and I think it's a great end to the album.
It doesn't work thematically, though.
How?
It just doesn't.
You think it would work thematically in the middle of the album?
No, I just wouldn't have had it there.
Don't get you strange prog people.
We're not that strange. We just like cogency, that's all. Bit of coherency.
You like really long, drawn-out songs that last 14 minutes and don't go anywhere.
I like really long, drawn-out songs that last 14 minutes and go everywhere. That's the difference. That's the difference. 14... I need to think of a song that's exactly 14 minutes long now.
Well, let's just finish off this review. I think that this is a good album. I think that sometimes the lyrics are a bit petty and some of the songs in the energy get a bit lost. But besides that, I think that it's got really interesting moments on it. And I love Jello's voice. I think it's so biting. It works really well. I would give this an 8.
I think this is one of the best punk albums I've ever heard. 4 out of 10. Still has plenty of problems.
I'm going to sit here until you say it's worth a 5.
No. No. I was going to give it a 3 initially, but it did grow on the teensy bit, so yeah, it gets the 4.
Let's talk about your next album, Joe. I'm sure that I'm going to think it's wonderful.
I know you're not, Nick.
Well, Joe went the actual spooky route for his pick.
Yes, I went for Symphony of the Vampire by Kamijo, who was the lead singer of the Vijayaru K metal band Versailles, and then he started releasing solo material, and then in 2014 he dropped Symphony of the Vampire, which became a bit of an instant cult classic. I fell in love with it. It became my favourite album of the year, and now I just love the album. Nick is looking at me very blankly.
Okay, well, Joe, you sent me the video for it, which is 30 minutes long and has this 2-minute introduction explaining the premise of the album. It's not actually included on the album release, but I'm going to mention it anyway. As soon as it got to the final line, I realised, oh no, I'm not going to be able to take this album seriously in the slightest, because it tells the story of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette's marriage, and how, when they were executed, Louis XVII was thrown into jail and died in jail, but people wonder whether he actually escaped and the person who died in jail was a fake. Then DNA testing proved it was him who died in jail, and then it goes, however, he was alive. And no, I don't. The problem, I can take albums which are bizarre and have really outlandish premises if they don't take themselves too seriously, and I think this album does take itself seriously.
No, this is where you're absolutely wrong, because I think it gets that balance. It doesn't take itself too seriously. The whole story is so outlandish. Just the whole he escapes from prison and then becomes a vampire to get his revenge, and then in the end he rips out his own heartbroken heart to place it on the throne. And it's so outlandish and it's so dramatic. How can it not be self-aware?
Because I don't think it is. That's not the impression I got at all from listening to it.
Okay.
They put so much thought into their craft, because, let's be honest, the composition on this album is absolutely incredible. And they put so much thought into it. It's so well crafted. How could they not be taking themselves seriously?
Because you can do both at the same time.
I don't think that this band can.
I think they are doing that. That is exactly what they're doing on this album.
By writing it well enough and clearly putting lots of thought and effort and dedication into it, and really sticking to the theme throughout. There isn't a single drop of self-awareness in this for me.
I think it's incredibly self-aware. I think this is something we're just going to have to fundamentally disagree on.
Probably. Well, at least you know that I liked parts of it.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
If I didn't know, I have just made my finger bleed from picking at it from being so angry.
Okay. Calm down.
How very Halloween.
Was that because I didn't like the Dead Kennedys? Or?
No. Okay. Well, the premise is outlandish for sure, and the lyrics are absurd, and it's such a hyperbolic take on the themes and imagery. But I think that it's really, really well structured as an album. It's only half an hour long, but
yeah.
it just goes by. It's great.
It's so good because what I think they got absolutely right is that it's the perfect length for the story that they want to tell. Admittedly, this is all in Japanese, so I don't understand all the lyrics, but I have read translations. And with the compositions, it flows so well. Each new song brings in another shift in dynamic, a different emotional weight, and even though it's generally quite high octane throughout, it does have a very clear momentum in where it's going, and because of that, it just flies by.
I don't have much else to say. That's my
Okay.
problem. I can't get into the premise of it and the lyrics because I just find them so ridiculous, and I try and ignore them as they go on because I think it detracts from the album. I much prefer listening to it as a straight symphonic metal album.
Yeah, which is, I think is fine. That's what I often do when I listen to it. Oh, you know what's perfect about it? The length is perfect for my bus journeys. So that's another positive thing I have to say about the album. I also think that Kamijo puts in quite a good vocal performance throughout it. He has quite a unique voice. It's a very chesty tenor.
I think it's all right. I think my main problem is it reminds me with how sort of dramatic it is, of how dramatic they think their own story is. And it just reminds me of how absurd it is. The harsh vocal sections in Dying Table are some of the worst I've ever heard.
See, I think
Completely just laughable, completely takes me out of the experience.
that is one of the few occasions of growling done right in metal, because it's not anywhere else on the album, and it really highlights the bloodlust that is part of that song.
I'm shaking my head.
I know you are.
Partly
I don't think
because you
it's-
said one of the few times it's done right in metal.
Yes.
Oh, you snob.
I'm not a snob, I'm just making the point. Like, if you use it all the time, then it becomes meaningless. So you need to use it sparingly, so it actually highlights the
I
effects
think
that you want it to pull.
I think many fans of the band Def would disagree with you.
Okay. They can.
Let's talk about some of the best parts. I
Okay.
think that the song Throne, the seventh part,
Yeah.
the final track is the best on the album. I think it's got the best riffs, just the greatest sections in general. The final minute is fantastic.
Oh, it's to die for. I like how it does harken back to the initial riff from Presto, the opening track. It's so epic, and like you said, the last track is it's structured so well. It flows so fluidly between the piano sections and then back into the riffage and then all over the place. Personally, my favourite track is Adagio of the Full Moon. I love that sound so much. It's so epic. There are just the guitars going away at the choirs and strings going everywhere. It sounds so epic, and I love it. And it's a little bit cheesy because it is so epic sounding, but it sounds so good at the same time. I just think it's brilliant.
The other track I was going to mention is Sonata, because I love the strings at the beginning. They've got such a
Oh,
great
yeah.
sound. The solo, the sort of rattly solo in the middle of it, is really great by itself when I'm not picturing what it represents with this sort of medieval Europe theme, and then that reminds me of how much I don't like the theme. But
Yeah.
I think on its own, it's really great. And the following electric guitar solo is one of the best on the album.
Yeah, there are so many good solos on the album, and it doesn't overdo tapping, which is good. So that gets a point for me. There's only one solo. Well, there's a couple, but it's the ending solo of Throne where they do some really, really nice tapping right at the end. Oh, it's so good. And
What have you got against tapping, Joe?
it's just often it's used not very inventively. That's what I find.
Okay, well, those were my two best songs, Throne and Sonata. I don't think there really are any weak tracks on the album, apart from the growly vocals in Dying Table I'm not a fan of. Besides that, I think it's if I don't think about it, it's an album I can really get with. I do enjoy listening to it. I just... I
It's the
I do
story.
not like the theme.
I love pretty much everything about
I think
this album.
it would be really disrespectful for me to give the album a low score just because I think the theme is not done very well, because the rest of it is executed almost perfectly.
Yeah, I agree most of it is executed almost perfectly. The only kind of criticism I might have is that some of the chord progressions rest a little bit too heavily on already established power metal chord progressions, but it's never too glaring. That's my one real criticism of the album. Everything else I loved. I love how outlandish the story is. I can buy 100% into how cheesy it is because it goes with it full throttle, and I find myself enjoying myself the 30 minutes throughout. So I give this one a 9 out of 10.
I would give it a light to sort of decent 7. Not sure
Okay.
which. Depends on the day.
Depends on the day. I recommend you check this out for Halloween.
Yeah, I recommend you check it out, but don't watch the video.
Yeah. Unless you like a bit of cheese.
Well, that's the main albums done. Let's move on to the shout-outs and mini-reviews that we have started doing.
Yeah. So one album I wanted to shout out was Mechanics of Dominion by Esmerine. Just because I like odd, experimental, classically tinged music. That's the style that floats my boat, and this album tickled me in that respect.
I did listen to it, and I thought that it was a mix of songs which were fascinating and songs which were very generic for the genre, actually. The opening track in particular, I just bored me senseless. Besides that, I do think it has some really great picks on it. It is, if I'm correct, it's a member of Godspeed You Black Emperor and a member of the Silver Mount Zion. And I don't know, it's mixed for me. I'd have to listen to it again to get a full opinion.
I can understand that point of view. I think why I like it is because I just like the aesthetic of it so much. It's such a crystally sound that makes me want to sit back and absorb as much of it as I can. There are, possibly 1 or 2 weaker tracks, but I really enjoyed it for the most part.
Okay. They've got a new album by Destroyer as well. I like Destroyer a lot. I think his last 2 albums, Poison Season and Kaput, were both great in their own way. One of them a very atmospheric, very ethereal quality album, followed by a very sort of grand, I think David Bowie at his most extravagant sort of sound on Poison Season. I love both of them. This new one, my thoughts on it is that, I've forgotten the guy's name now, but the guy who is Destroyer, who was also in the new Pornographers, has got a way with sound. Every single instrument on it sounds incredible, and it's mixed so incredibly well. And I think that just is there to cover up some pretty uninspired songwriting.
Yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on the album, because they sounded good and they sounded like decently composed songs, but something just wasn't clicking with me.
I think at times it's his vocal delivery for sure. On the very first song, Sky's Grey, he's got a bit where he repeatedly goes, I've been working on the new Oliver Twist. I've been working on the new Oliver Twist. And he does that a good few times, and it's just weird, and I don't like it. And he does that a few times on the album. And the first time I listened to it, I really enjoyed it. And then I realised I'm not sure why I really enjoyed it. It's like this very deceitful album.
Yeah, I really don't have anything else or anything to add to that, really.
I'm going to do my classic, go and listen to Kaput or Poison Season if you want to.
Listen to more of the old music.
Yeah.
It's nothing good new out. Talking about nothing good new out, Niall Horan released Flicker. I thought we should mention it because we reviewed Harry Styles. So, there's that. I found it
I don't actually know who he is.
He's the other member of One Direction, one no one cares about.
Who?
Niall.
I know there's that other one who has that name and
Yeah.
does the things who
Yeah.
people didn't think much of. And then there was Harry Styles who tried to rip off all of those 70s and 80s bands and failed.
And there was Zayn who tried to be
That's
edgy.
who I was thinking of.
Okay, there we go. So there's Niall, and then there's another one. Oh, maybe he's the one no one cares about. I don't really care about any of them. But his album was intensely average, which in a way made it both better and worse than Harry Styles' album, which had actually some decent highlights, but then some really awful songs. I can't... Oh, Kiwi and Only Angel, it's just terrible. Just terrible. So I thought I'd shout out the album, but I'd also give a special shout out to the song Seeing Blind, which to me harkens back to our very first podcast, where I named Eyes Wide Shut by JLS as one of my least favourite tracks of all time, just because of how lazy the central imagery is and how if you try and scratch anywhere beneath the surface, there's nothing there. Seeing Blind is basically like that, but even worse. So in the song, he's like singing his infatuation to this woman, but then he ends the chorus with "I must be seeing blind," which I found completely bizarre. Like, if you listen to a piece of music which you think is good, you don't say that you're hearing deaf, do you? That would just sound stupid. So in lieu of this fact, I have prepared a short parody of Seeing Blind. It's called Tasting Air. I think we'll put it just at the end of the podcast.
I've heard it. It's fun.
So yeah, I hope you will enjoy that. And I think that's
one
it.
last shout out.
Yeah.
This is actually to an album I haven't had a chance to listen to yet, which came out on Friday. The new Obliviscaris album, Earn.
Yeah.
So this is a band that I've loved since their debut album, The Aurora Veil, and then they released their second album, Citadel. And I think both are fantastic examples of quite extreme metal.
Yeah.
And the solos in their work are fantastic. The compositions are really tight. I think their second album is a bit more consistent than their debut, though without the strong highlights. A bit like Brockhampton, Saturation 1 and 2 in that respect. I haven't had a chance to listen to their third album, though. If I'd remembered it was coming out on Friday, I would have pushed for us to review it in the main podcast.
Yeah,
Joe has listened to it.
Yeah, I did manage to get a listen to it, and I really enjoyed it. I'd have to listen to their first two albums again to kind of place it among them, but I would have given it a light solid 8 out of 10. I'd have to listen to it a couple more times.
I'm really looking forward to listening to it.
But yeah, no, very enjoyable metal album. So if that's what floats you both, then go give it a listen.
Well, I bet you're really excited for the next podcast, Joe, because there's a certain artist who Joe is a huge fan of that might be releasing their album.
Might be. We'll see. We still haven't gotten a definite from her yet, though. No. So, tender hooks.
Joe likes Bjork.
I'm a huge Bjork fan, and her second album is indeed Post.
Did I mention that I listened to Debut?
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I've got through Debut now. Debut is interesting, but clearly, I mean, it's clearly a debut. You know, she's clearly finding herself.
It's definitely because I wouldn't put it at her best album, but there are quite a lot of interesting ideas, I think, on that. Come to Me is a gorgeous song. I love that. That's my favourite from Debut. But there are some tracks that go on for a little bit too long, I think, but otherwise I still think it's a solid album.
And of course I've listened to It's Oh So Quiet from Post.
Of course.
Which everyone's heard of. Which is a great track.
That's a really good cover as well. That's another really good cover in the middle of an album. That works. So, yeah. And Post is my second favourite Bjork album. My first being Homogenic, my third being Vulnicura, my fourth being Vespertine, fifth being Debut, and then the other three I kind of aren't as good as the rest.
You mean other four, right?
Don't. Don't start that. I've already died in a Miley Cyrus torture chamber, so... Anyway,
let's just recap on what we thought of the albums then.
Yes, so there was Weezer, which
what Weezer we were going to slam the door in their faces.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We need to do the trick or treat things. Yeah. So I'm slamming the door in the face. Julien Baker.
I'm going to invite her in to have a cup of tea and give her a hug. I think she needs it.
See, I was just going to give her a mixture of high-profile candy and the bargain basement, just so she can choose. It kind of feels like she just needs to comfort eat, so she just give her the sugar. And
I'm not going to open the door to the dead Kennedys. I'm worried about what they would do to my house.
They'll kill your children.
I can see toilet paper being involved.
Yeah, I would. I'd just look around the side of the door, see that they're there, and just nope, turn off the lights.
And I think that Kamijo is the sort of person that would take it all a bit too far and actually try to bite me.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be interesting. That'd be a proper Halloween. I'd like that.
I would slam the door in his face personally.
I'd give him.
I would let his backing band have a few Mars bars, but him personally, I'd just be a bit like. Ugh.
I'd leave a trail of candy from my door to a graveyard with me there and see what happens. Because I don't have an interesting enough life, damn it. So that's that. And then quick reviews are things. We don't need to go over them again.
We did those things. We've got some shout-outs. It's shout-out time.
Shout-out.
So I have heard from a little bird that our good friends Charlie Alcock and James Gardner have got their second comedy masterpiece coming out on Halloween. So make sure you check out Alcock. How is Charlie's surname pronounced?
I think it's Alcock.
Alcock. Check out Alcock Gardner, the comedy duo with all of the pizzazz you could ever need.
Yeah. New episode coming out soon, so yeah.
Also check out Stacey's Pop Culture Parlour.
Because she's our favourite.
She's our favourite. Her podcast is the best. I mean, if you had to choose between our podcast or hers, you should choose hers.
Probably.
Yeah. And finally, shameless self-plug for Joe.
Yes. My next video will be a video essay on why Kid A is such an outstanding album, so it's a little bit relevant to the what happened at the start of the show.
When are you going to carry on reviewing my top 100 songs, Joe?
Eventually. I'll get round to it.
I'm sure you will.
Eventually.
Well, that's the end of our Halloween-themed podcast. We're going to end with the scariest of songs about muffins.
Oh, muffins. Oh, I can't think of anything scarier than a cover of a One Direction member's song, but I managed to get through it, and I hope you're all suitably
We're going
spooked.
to work on resurrecting Joe for the next podcast, because I can see your ethereal form drifting away into
Slowly
the
fading.
nether realm.
I think I need a few, maybe a few smelling salts if you've got them.
Anyway, for the meantime, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, enjoy your Halloween.
Enjoy your Halloween if you're, under 13 years old, when you're still allowed to.
Yeah.
Yeah, Halloween does nothing for me.
I just listen to scary music.
Go and listen to Fashion Zombies by the Aquabats.
Just listen to themed music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see you in 2 weeks. Yeah. I've been Joe.
What? Since when? I've been Nick then.
And this has been F Sharp A Sharp Revisited. Goodbye.
Bye. I have tasted a chocolate cake, the best that was ever baked for me. My tongue it tingled good. I have stuffed myself with all the muffins I could, all the flavors stuffed up, my senses knocked me out. But oh my, you just took me by surprise, because my tongue discerns with flair, and it says I'm tasting air. Oh no, it's too good to be all mine. My tongue is hanging out, I'm aware. Yeah, I'm just tasting air. It's a compliment to your muffins. Yeah, I'm just tasting air, tasting air, tasting air, tasting air, tasting air. I'm just tasting air.
F sharp, A sharp.